House Bill 2015. Before we get to that, ask for comments on the minutes from January 23rd, 28th, and 30th. And if there are no comments, I think we agreed that if there's no comments or changes, we'll just accept them and approve them as is. Any changes or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as drafted. So moving on, we'll have a hearing on House Bill 2015. And to start off the hearing, ask Jenna Moyer with the Revisor's Office to give a quick briefing on the bill. Whenever you're ready, Jenna.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Jenna Moyer, Office of Revisor of Statutes. I'm going to give you a bill brief on House Bill 2015, which directs the Secretary for Children and Families to request a waiver from the SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program rules, to prohibit the purchase of candy and soft drinks with food assistance. And this bill amends a statute we should all be familiar with by now, KSA 39709, which is a statute that outlines eligibility and program requirements for public assistance programs. New language is added on page 10 of the bill in subsection B21 that the Secretary for Children and Families shall request a waiver from the USDA to exclude soft drinks and candy from the definition of eligible foods that may be purchased with food assistance. If that waiver is granted, the Secretary shall implement the waiver. And if no waiver is granted, the Secretary shall annually request the waiver until it's granted. And this section uses the definitions of candy and soft drinks from KSA 7930-602C. And soft drinks, this is from the Kansas Retailer Sales Tax Act. And soft drink there means non-alcoholic beverages that contain natural or artificial sweeteners, which excludes beverages that contain milk or milk products, rice or similar milk substitutes, or beverages that are greater than 50% vegetable or fruit juice. So if you have a juice that's half or more juice, it doesn't count as a soft drink. And then the definition of candy is a preparation of sugar, honey, or other natural or artificial sweeteners combined with chocolate, fruits, nuts, or other ingredients or flavorings in the form of bars, drops, or pieces. And it excludes any preparation containing flour and excludes anything that requires refrigeration. And I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Jenna. Committee, any questions for the revisors? Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jenna, would a candy apple fall underneath the candy description here?
If it does not require refrigeration.
Don't think they do. I think I see them in the grocery store out like with the watermelons.
It would be candy combined with fruit, so it would probably fall under candy.
This is petitioning the Secretary to request the waiver and then continually do so. A, has there ever been such a waiver applied for? And then B, can you remind me when we see a fiscal note on a House bill?
Okay, our office doesn't do the fiscal notes, so hopefully that's something that has been independently prepared by the Office of the Budget. And your first question would be, has this specific waiver been applied for? Not to my knowledge, no. But there have been instances in which we have directed the Secretary to apply for waivers through legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for our presentation. My question is, with respect to what is considered candy, would this include those nutrition bars that have candy? And in addition to that, for those individuals who might be getting closer to their twilight years, let's say, a product like Ensure that comes in a bar form, is that included as well, or is there a specific amount of sugars that has to be in the product before it's considered a candy?
Okay, so I'm not an expert on what does and does not fall within this, but I'm just going to apply what you asked to the definition. And just to my recollection of when I've bought granola bars and similar bars in the past, they almost always have flour or oatmeal or something of that would keep it from being a candy bar. And then, were you asking about like Ensure bars? I'm not familiar with those. But there are no specific
Give yourself some time.
sugar grams requirements. It's a pretty generic definition.
Okay, yeah, give yourself some time. You might become a little more familiar with those as time goes by. Thank you very much for your answer, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any further questions for Office of Revisers? Seeing none, thank you very much, Jenna. Move on to the proponents of House Bill 2015. First proponent, we have in person Roy Leonardson, visiting fellow Operations Solutions Project. Welcome to committee.
Thank you very much, members of the committee. I'm delighted to be here. As you said, my name is Roy Leonardson. I'm here on behalf of the Opportunity Solutions Project. I just want to get right to why we believe that this bill is important, and then I'm happy to answer questions when you take proponent questions. So it's the #1 item, soda, is the #1 item purchased with SNAP benefits right now. Candy's #3. 72% of Kansas SNAP recipients are also on Medicaid, meaning that Kansas taxpayers could be potentially paying twice, one for the junk food and then again for the medical costs that follows. And let me explain why I say that. 1 in 5 children in America is obese, 1 in 3 adults is pre-diabetic or diabetic, and Medicaid is overwhelmed with obesity-related diseases. And we're up against the soda industry, if you're wondering why this hasn't happened in the past, and why I'll talk in a little bit why I'm excited for the future. I also want to add this. The original food stamp program never included soda or candy or those types of things. Started early in the 30s, formalized by JFK and based on his West Virginia experience in the early 60s. And in the late 70s, there was a Food Stamp Act where that was amended when Jimmy Carter was president, and these were expanded to that. So originally, that was never the intent, because it's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So our opinion is that Kansas taxpayers should not subsidize products that directly fuel obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, while we pour billions into Medicaid to treat those very, very specific diseases. So the next part I just want to briefly is, things are changing rapidly. I wanted to address the waiver question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The state of Maine applied for a waiver in 2018. I know that because I helped write it, and the person that wrote it is now the deputy counsel in the White House for the Domestic Policy Council. You guys know him. He's Sam Adolphson. He's been here many times. He used to work at FGA. Sam actually wrote that waiver, submitted that waiver, and it was denied at the time. In fact, Sonny Perdue and the Trump administration did not support this effort. I can tell you that that is changing. And it's changing because we've decided to go back to the state capitals, 1, and 2, the President of the United States has made different decisions on the direction he is going in the Health and Human Services Department. As you may have heard, RFK was approved in the committee hearing today, and now to the full vote. He's been very clear about Make America Healthy Again, and this is a part of that. So we expect a very, very different environment going forward. Just so you know, about 15 states are considering this. It passed in Wyoming, I think, yesterday, 7-1. I'll be testifying on 2 more states this week, Idaho, Mississippi, Governor Huckabee Sanders and from Arkansas has already submitted her waiver request directly from the governor's office. We have another 6 or 7 governors lined up as well to request exactly the waiver that we have before you here today. So the movement is growing because state lawmakers who bear the brunt of all of this stuff see it firsthand. The folks in Washington, D.C., with all due respect, do not. They see the dollars from the big-time lobbyists. So it's a very different dynamic, and that's why we're excited to fight from Topeka to Washington, D.C., as opposed to Washington, D.C. to Topeka. We've changed that. So, finally, I want to add that SNAP already has restrictions. First of all, this is common sense. Some will say it's government overreach, but it's not. SNAP can't be used to buy alcohol or cigarettes. SNAP can't be used for hot-prepared meals in grocery stores. The WIC program, which already works and works well. I think there's close to 50,000 or so Kansans on that program. It restricts unhealthy foods, and it works. No candy, no soda, no cookies, no brownies. None of that stuff is allowed under the Women and Children program right now, which is a similar program with a very different purpose. Just as a reminder, the taxpayer-funded program, SNAP, is not a personal grocery stipend. It is a nutrition assistance program designed to help folks. And at some point, and I'll conclude by saying this, is that a can of Monster costs $3.39. That's the same price as 2 bags of carrots. A 12-pack of Monster is about $24. Well, that's a meal for a family of 4. And what has happened on one side, where you traditionally had the issue of there was not access to groceries for folks, so-called food deserts, that has dramatically changed. Dillon's, Walmart, Target, Instacart, they all now deliver directly to people's homes all throughout Kansas, believe it or not, and I had looked. And one of the things that's important to see is if you go on, like to go on to Dillon's right now, you'll see EBT eligible, and it's all featured. Monster, energy drinks, all of these things are featured. I don't care if people want to buy that stuff. We just don't think it's a good idea for the reasons of health and taxpayer dollars that those monies are used for those purposes, and they should be redirected to the original purpose, supplemental nutrition assistance program. And I think you can do a lot for the health of folks right here in Kansas and beyond. So I will stop there, Mr. Chairman, and when you ask questions, I'm happy to answer them if you have any.
You can take questions now if you like. Committee, we'll start with questions. Representative Helwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. I guess my biggest question with limiting pop, I think that's a great idea, but how will convenience stores and other stores be able to, as they're scanning, you got an 18-year-old checker, how are they supposed to know what's eligible and what isn't?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. There's folks from the Convenience Store Association. They have their perspective on this. I'll give you my perspective. I've owned a business. I've used a point-of-sale POS system before. They make changes every single day, believe it or not. New products come on the market, new things come in. Every single day, changes are being made. Do I think there is a slight one-time inconvenience? It's entirely possible as they code foods. Remember, the WIC program already has these restrictions. There's numbers of restrictions. You can't buy alcohol. You can't buy cigarettes. And so you're adding soda and candy to this restriction. These are computer systems. No one is bringing their EBT card, setting it down and going whoosh, whoosh, and pulling it up. It's all electronic now, so a lot of that stuff is known. Now, I think they may disagree on the difficulty of this. I will just close by saying, I'm not sure bureaucratic excuses are a reason to do nothing. And I do think that there may be some bumps in the road, and maybe it's not perfect. I'm not going to predict it. I've owned a business, and I understand every time a new rule comes out, there is an impact. But the price of doing nothing because there's a bureaucratic roadblock to me is way too painful. And I'll just say this, the Make America Healthy Again movement, I think eventually will be a very bipartisan movement. It will change people's minds, incredibly so. We've got stuff coming on changing school lunch programs. I'm excited as a parent, and I'm sure many of you in the room as parents and grandparents are excited. We're finally having honest conversations about the food in this country versus our friends in Europe and other places. There are issues. There are issues. And now we're going to have a great conversation. And I like that Kansas is one of the first states to tackle it. You guys did it last year, a year before anyone else even thought about it. And here you are first out of the gate this year, once again getting out and taking that leadership role. And I will say this, Kansas is an agricultural state. It matters in the Senate and in the House of Representatives and Congress what Kansas, your delegation hears back, because it's all in the Farm Bill. Kansas is a very, very important state. You may not know that, in Washington, but it really is. It's outsized influence.
That's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So can I follow up on the question from Representative Hellwig? This was an objection a couple years ago or last year when we heard the bill. Just the complications, I think, at the retail level. And currently, there are restrictions on SNAP benefits, and I think it was mentioned prepared foods.
And hot foods, yeah.
And hot foods. So at a convenience store, a lot of them have semi-prepared foods, hot foods. I guess I defer that to the revisers, or you're happy to hear your answer as well. Are those like hot dogs or those different things, are those restricted? How would those fall under current law?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jenna Moyer, Revisor's Office again. And the items that are sort of hot and ready would be restricted. One of the main examples that comes up would be like the Costco or Sam's Club rotisserie chicken, because that's sold hot and prepared, ready to go. That would be prohibited under current restrictions. And the retailers would just have to have that all programmed in, what counts and what doesn't.
So, and I know not every retailer has hot prepared or semi-prepared foods, but a lot of them tend to have that. So there's already in their systems kind of a process to make those distinctions on what foods are and what foods are not. So, but that was probably definitely one of the top objections a couple of years ago. So Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. He actually asked my question here initially. I might have further comment later, though. Thank you.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. You had mentioned that soft drinks were so are we talking what we normally consider soda pop? You know, we called it soda when I was a kid, or as I look at what the definition was, here it said drinks that were less than 50%, I'm assuming real juice, would fall under that category. Is that?
Real juice would be exempt, right? You could buy real juice.
At what percentage? I think I read 50%. Is that a correct statement?
Mr. Chairman, yes, if I'm correct, Representative, yes.
Okay, so, and this is just an idea, right? As opposed to expecting the end user to make those changes, and even with the healthy food initiative, aside from the fact that I do believe that there were McDonald's hamburgers or Burger King hamburgers that were delivered at some point to the kids that visited our nation's capital. It's besides the point on this healthy food initiative. Would it not be more appropriate to pass legislation that dictates to those individuals that are the manufacturers of said products, so that the end user isn't the one who has to, in fact, go out and take a look at, for instance, what percentage of real juice is in a product? Because I'll tell you now, if you go to the store, and you look under fruit juice, for you to determine how much sugar is in there, right? You got to look. You got to make that determination, because wouldn't it not be a more simple task to go out and make changes on how we might label our foods?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carr, as a husband who has been sent back to the grocery store for bringing home the wrong cranberry juice, I can assure you I appreciate your concern with the labels of juice. I will just say this. This is a government-run program that spends hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you're looking for a way to make a change in behaviors with both the consumer and the manufacturer, this will get people's attention. There's a reason that these industries spend millions of dollars on lobbying to protect what they have. They understand that. And I think as someone who's probably closer to me in age, you've seen the change in convenience stores. We've all seen the back of the refrigeration that has gone from a bunch of products now to an entire wall filled with energy drinks that are $3, $4 a pop, or those little 5-hour energy things that are $5 each. I mean, the market has responded to what consumers want or don't want, and I believe that if you make changes in your SNAP program, the convenience stores will once again respond, and they'll make sure the juice has more than 50% in it, and that they will respond accordingly. So for me personally, I think the free market will absorb this and change it and adapt accordingly, just like they did before the late 70s when this was not allowed. So I appreciate your concern.
If I may. And I can appreciate your position. And I also remember you stating that that we have these food deserts. I happen to live in one, right? So I'm well aware of food deserts. And in fact, the closest Walmart will deliver. They will deliver whatever you choose to purchase. But we're talking about individuals that don't have that extra money, right? So I would say that this was punishing the wrong group initially. I can agree that those changes need to be made. I, for one, if anyone's ever gone to any of the legislative dinners with me, I'm always particular about what it is that I'm eating and certainly drinking. I just don't think it's fair, to say the least, that we put that burden on the least of us when these companies and corporations and different.
Representative Carr, do you have a question? Or
yeah, if you let me get to it.
Sure, we do have some time, so if you
okay.
get to it quickly, that'd be great. Thank you.
So my question to you is, would that not be something that you would take up with those manufacturers, as opposed to starting, at the bottom and attempting to work up? We're back to that. Can't we start at the top and work our way down so that we make those changes so that the individual who's already struggling doesn't have to be the one who's making a sacrifice, because there will be a sacrifice that's being made at some point.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carr, thank you for your question. I can just say it like this. It's not a Kansas problem. It's not a Wichita problem. I'm a kid from Maine, and it's worse. We have much more people. We have double the number of people on welfare in Maine and food stamps than you have here in Kansas. What it is a much larger problem, as you well know, and I'm sure you don't need me to explain to you. And I just want to go back to the MAHA movement. It's going to change all of us, how we talk and think about food. And your concerns are legitimate, but at least now we're having these discussions. We've never even talked about this stuff. For me personally, maybe it's that Congress decides to fund, if you live in an area designated as food, desert or whatever, then you get a bump up and Instacart fees are covered. I don't care, personally, and I want to have all of these discussions. I think getting food delivered from a Dillon's or a Walmart is a heck of a lot cheaper and probably more cost effective in the long run. But to your point is, if money is scarce and you want to have better, healthier living and eating, then let's have that discussion and say, well, look, we need people in these areas with these zip codes. They need to be able to waive the Instacart fees or the Walmart delivery fees, and we eat it. Great. I love it.
Yeah, so do I. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Instacart, you said that it was happening, that's like DoorDash for groceries?
Yes, my children tell me that's exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I like to go. I like the BOGO, buy one, get one, but.
Thank you for that clarification. Is that happening in our rural grocery stores in our rural districts as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think that rural Kansans, like rural Maine or any other state, is going to have particular differences that are going to be different. So your local convenience store in a rural part of your state maybe this catch-all, maybe it's an IGA or sort of the more old-fashioned grocery store. It's not going to be this big store. That's just a fact of life and the delivery stuff. So I'm not gonna, I have no quarrel with what you're saying. I understand it.
So wait, no, so my question was if there was like rural DoorDash for groceries, Instacart, whatever, Uber Eats, for the rural districts, for their local, like Dollar General, Casey's, et cetera.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would defer to you guys. I live in a rural district. I live about 40 miles out in the Everglades, south of Immokalee and Everglades City, and our stores deliver through Instacart because my mom uses it. That's all I can say.
If I may. So if you live in a rural district that maybe doesn't have that option, that has a grocery store that can deliver to you, or access to food, maybe they're in the food desert, would they qualify for an exemption from this then?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, if I could go back to sort of Representative Carr's thing, is that the questions you're raising are exactly the type of questions I hope that we have. And so if you live in a rural area as designated, then would it make sense to me that food stamp programs recognize that people have bigger challenges. But that's the bigger question that we're going to be going down, right, with this whole Make America Healthy Again. But that is federal law. These will be federal discussions on the food issue. They would not be a state-based discussion unless they did block grants and gave you the flexibility, which may happen.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think this is understood, but just to be clear, this is not restricting the purchase of food.
Yep.
This is only restricting sugar drinks and candy, so it's just one element of it. So they can still go down and buy other foods with their SNAP benefits. So it's just taking, I think, the spirit of the law, nutritional assistance program, and understanding, kind of making that distinction. Representative Brownlee Page.
Well, I was going to go back. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. I too live in an urban area where there's a food drought. We don't have grocery stores, not a lot of them. And most of the people that I know who are getting SNAP can't afford a lot of this. You're saying it's a federal thing, but you do have to consider all of this because they're struggling. And then we have an issue with grocery stores, the big ones that are putting all the little stores out of business. And we got a co-op. People can't afford it. If you have a car, you can drive somewhere else and get what you want. And most of them can't. And they don't deliver in every area. Sounds good, but I'm just telling you, they don't. But I hear what you're saying. We do want people to be healthy. But the problem is, I still believe that people should have that choice. And then when you, well, I won't go there because the issue is supposed to be the candy and the pop. I get it. But it hurts a lot of businesses too, who employ a lot of people. So then what are they supposed to do?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, again, thank you for your question. I will just say this, that if you're banning soda and candy, it will be replaced, and yet you will have better options. That's how the market generally works, because they still want customers to come in their store and buy stuff. And $3.50 energy drinks versus some other less costly drink may be an option. So I think you'll see the market respond. They're responding now to a $400 million opportunity to have soda and candy that will disappear, and they will change accordingly. That's just my experience with businesses generally. Doesn't matter what the business is. They want customers. They'll change their behavior to keep and get more customers.
Can I ask another question? Can you buy energy drinks? I didn't know you could buy energy drinks with a SNAP card. You can?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would encourage you to go to the, and I shouldn't pick on Dillon's, I don't mean to, go to Walmart.
We don't have a Dillon's.
Go to Walmart and look in there, type in Monster energy drink or Red Bull, whatever it is, and it flashes right up. You can buy a 12-pack, a 6-pack, or a single can, or a 2-can, and it has a yellow thing that says EBT eligible right on it. They make it very clear. Every single product has got a nice bright yellow note just to let you know that you can grab it. I didn't know that either until I started looking at this.
Senator Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. I've got a couple questions. I'll start with, you said you were up against the soda industry. I'm looking at opponents here, and I don't see a soda industry client or representative on the opponents. I'll leave that alone. You said that soda was the number one purchased item on SNAP benefits. What's the number one item purchased overall?
Oh, you mean in totality? I have no, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't know how you would sort that data. I mean, it's a good question. I don't believe it would be soda, but I could be wrong.
It seems like if we know it for, SNAP benefits, we would know it otherwise as well. Maybe I'll find that information and bring it back to the committee. Tell me about OSP. It says here you're a visiting fellow, and I'm not familiar with that title nor the organization. I'm new to this committee. Actually, this is my first day as ranking member on this committee.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, if I may. So OSP is a partner organization with the Foundation for Government Accountability, a C3 and a C4. Just to put that in English, the C3 thinks and writes about things. The C4 talks about it. The C4 is not tax deductible and must pay taxes on everything. So that's the two differentiators. So my time is split. It's an IRS rule that we try to follow as close as possible. I started FGA 13 years ago. I had a very specific goal in mind. I wanted to spread the gospel about work and how important it is and the difference that it makes. And I also wanted to connect things like health and other issues that make Americans possible for the American dream. So we looked at welfare, unemployment, this wide variety of things. We started with a $50,000 grant, raised about $20 million this year. We have 50 full-time employees, 74 contractors. We don't take any government money. We don't take corporate money. We basically ask legislators what are the issues facing them around health care, welfare issues. We do an agenda, and then we pitch our donors. We don't do it the other way around. They don't pitch us. So 13-year project, building it. We now have a federal team, and we work in 32 states at this point.
Thank you for that very thorough explanation. With your discussion of federal changes, just for committee consideration, if federal changes are coming, maybe we could save our Kansas efforts and not direct our secretary to keep reapplying for waivers and let the feds deliver us from evil. But a question for the reviser. Would Gatorade fall underneath the description of soft drinks? Because I'm thinking if a kid's got football practice and, maybe some cramping legs, a Gatorade oftentimes helps out with that. But I also know that there's sodium and sugar in Gatorade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that if it contained natural or artificial sweeteners, it would be a soft drink, but perhaps a Gatorade Zero wouldn't contain those sweeteners and would not qualify as a soft drink.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I got.
Quick, seeing no questions. So can you talk a little bit about, just looking at percentages, I think Representative Housley may have hinted at this. 7 children at home. I spend some time in the grocery store, and I know it goes into my grocery cart, but taking a look at round, it doesn't generally appear that a large percentage of what's in a grocery cart is soda pop or candy. So looking at just, if you take a look at what's going through the cash register at a grocery store, it seems odd that SNAP benefits proportionally seem different than the regular market. Why is it that such a high number or high amount of SNAP card purchases go to soda pop? And I'm going down a certain lane because there is a certain amount of fraud with the SNAP cards and food stamps and everything. Can you go into that aspect of this?
I'm not, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your question. I will say this, is that folks may make different decisions based on their personal lifestyle, so what pocket it's coming out of. And so, if you've got 7 kids to feed, you're going to make a different set of decisions if it's coming out of your paycheck. I think the bigger issue is we have a government policy that allows things we know to be unhealthy, and that this is a goal to change that directive and you know, the fraud and all of those things, there's no debate about that, and that's all going to be dealt with, and that's all coming. That's a top priority for this administration incoming. But I think, you know, I guess I'll just leave it at that, that it's about personal lifestyle choices.
Committee, any further questions? Our quick one, we do have one more proponent, so please try to get right to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to get right to the question, is there any movement at all, you know, at the federal level or otherwise, to force the manufacturers of the different products to have healthier products, healthier choices, and not just in drinks, but, you know, for instance, you know, a Hot Pocket, which you can buy cold, you can spend that. It's one of the most the unhealthy things you could ever consume. But we don't touch those people. We don't touch those major corporations that are certainly in a better financial position than the constituents, our constituents, that are at the end user portion of this, buying the products.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carr, two things. One, you're going to see a series of things, assuming that the RFK confirmation happens, a series of talking about these kinds of issues. What is in our food supply? What are we putting in there? I'm sure you've heard RFK talk about seed oils and all that. That's all coming. But to bring it back to the candy and the pop issue, I can tell you that a congressman has just introduced, is it Braken? Congressman Braken from Oklahoma, the SNAP renewal effort, and this is specifically in there, what we're talking about today. He introduced that last week. So this is all coming fast and furious. You're on the right side of history, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll move on then to our next proponent, Mr. Nicholas Reinecker, citizen. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Nicholas Reinecker from Inman, Kansas. If I could just take one second here. On my testimony, if you look at reference number 4, you can find the list of all eligible foods. And some of them might surprise you. Even you can go buy, they say alcohol is banned, but you can go buy alcohol in the form of vanilla extract at the grocery store. But that's a side point. I was looking up just while we were sitting there from the Economic Policy Innovation Center, who got their stats from USDA. The number 1 item purchased is soft drinks. Number 2 is milk, then ground beef, bags, snacks, nicks, cheese, baked breads, cold cereal, fresh chicken, and frozen handheld and snacks. I'm a proponent to this bill because it takes an offensive stance without eliminating SNAP altogether in the state of Kansas and forfeit, I think, $15 million that we get from federal money. It facilitates good stewardship of taxpayer money while eliminating some unhealthy substances that is currently purchased with that taxpayer money. In 2016, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a historical document review that shed light on the massive conspiracy by the sugar lobby. Without morals and ethics, crony conspiratorial capitalism can be a very shrewd and profitable thing to do, because review papers, especially those peer-reviewed with conflict of interest issues that get published in a very prominent journal, tend to shape the overall scientific discussion. We see that in a lot of discussions under this dome: pharmaceuticals, gambling, alcohol, tobacco. I want to make clear, though, I am an advocate for capitalism with morals, and in no way am I testifying as an advocate for taking choices away from people who work and receive a paycheck to use that money to buy whatever they want. But I do not believe that those on supplemental nutrition assistance that is funded by the taxpayer are entitled to consumables that have minimal or no nutritional value and may cause inflammation and harm, specifically soft drinks and candy, regardless of moderation. I've heard as much as 10% of SNAP goes to sugar water, pop, soda, juice, less than 50% of natural juice. The consequences of consuming these things like high fructose corn syrup and synthetically derived sweeteners are a potential spike in blood sugar with a crash that may hinder concentration, elevate blood pressure, and increase instances of liver disease and type 2 diabetes through a general poor metabolic condition with inflammation. The current situation also puts a burden on me, the taxpayer, not once, but twice. First, through the use of my tax money to pay for these products for someone receiving these benefits, and then second, at times, helping to pay for drugs or pharmaceuticals like high blood pressure pills or atypical weight loss preparations like Ozempic, which cost thousands of dollars, in addition to surgeries to combat the potential harm done. This does not factor into any mental health issues that may develop from a poor diet, which affects long-term taxpayer costs, including even possibility of state-funded contract nursing in hospitals. So if we think about the dopamine response, or desire and self-control, or substances that cross the blood-brain barrier, if I bring in a plate of carrots or celery or orange juice versus soda pop, versus donuts and brownies, how many here would go for the carrots and celery? The combination of refined carbohydrates and fats, often found in ultra-processed foods and especially soft drinks or candy, seem to have a supra-addictive effect on the brain reward systems, making them akin to substances like nicotine in cigarettes or even heroin. Not only do we have that spike and crash, how you feel after drinking a 44 ounce of a soft drink, we also know that a lot of these foods or substances do have no nutritional value, that starve the cells and add fat through empty calories, which helps in producing more inflammation. People got to eat, and if these options are prohibited, maybe they will choose healthier options. I run a restaurant. I play with the combinations of carbs and fats and proteins and spices and seasonings and try to use the most natural and high-quality ingredients I can. But definitions and eligibility matter, and I understand the frustration when you look at a statute and you're reading all these things and you can't have this, but you can have this and all that. It's kind of not cool. But the fact that SNAP can't be, and the fact that SNAP cannot be used for hot foods is an issue that needs to be looked at as well. If I was king for a day, I would amend this bill to include products with any traceable amounts of trans fat and many other products that are not nutritious, and also allow certain hot foods and more plants. But this is at least a start. We have WIC for infants and mothers. I don't like the profit motive that it looks like. I reject the idea of tax revenue and state lines. I would even go so far as to have rations being contracted with culturally appropriate foods. In the final analysis, our poor health is an existential threat to our country. Please, everybody here, read your labels. Read what's in your food when you buy it. Buy fruit and juice it yourself. Walk that extra mile or two to the store for exercise. Grow a garden. Be informed. And regardless of the health of those not using public assistance versus those who are, taxpayers should not be on the hook to pay for soft drinks and or candy for those receiving supplemental nutrition assistance. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I will stand for any questions.
You committee, any questions? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'll pose the same question to you that I posed the previous presenter. Do you think that the manufacturing, those companies that manufacture the foods hold any culpability, or should we not be going after them before we go after the end user? There are things, for instance, that foods that we produce here that they simply don't allow in other countries because of their lack of nutritional value. If we didn't allow this stuff in our stores, then a person wouldn't have an option, right? So that would get to your end result, and it wouldn't take advantage of the least of us in order to make this happen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think that getting rid of the FDA in some respects, definitely taking away a lot of their a power and getting back to the states is a good thing. I think we need to look at ingredients, what ingredients are allowed to be put into food, and then not so much the products, but the ingredients. But I think that companies should be able to do what they want to do within a framework of what is healthy versus what is not healthy. And the end user who's getting public assistance, the least of these, should have nutritional options no matter what.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say this. As someone who's eaten quite a bit of candy in my day, Kit Kats have flour, just so you know.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none. Representative Owsley.
Not a question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just the AI overview says, yes, Gatorade Zero contains artificial sweeteners. Thought I'd share that with the committee. Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. That's all that we show for proponents. Anybody else here wishing to speak as a proponent? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the hearing and we'll open the opponents section of the hearing. First, we have Mr. Brian Posler, Executive Director, Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. Welcome to committee, sir.
I am Brian Posler. I represent Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. We are the statewide nonprofit trade association for all the independent energy distributors in Kansas, as well as for all the fuel retailers, of which there are about 2,000 in the state. They are in every county. They are in every one of your districts. And my members are asking you not to pass this bill. I also am proud to serve on the statewide retail council of the Chamber of Commerce. So hopefully you had a chance to see the State Chamber of Commerce submitted testimony in opposition to this bill as well. I was able to work with them as they developed some of that testimony. So even though they're not in person, please do note that. All right, so I understand why this bill sounds attractive, right? It's a simple bill, and it can help us all feel good about striking a blow against obesity. And by the way, why should taxpayers be footing the bill for unhealthy foods, right? All that makes sense. The problem is that this bill is not going to solve the problem of unhealthy food, and yet it is going to impose costs as an unfunded mandate on our retailers. It's going to cost small businesses time, money, and hassle, and potentially have worse consequences than that. So why is that? First of all, the definitions are a mess. There's a really good reason the USDA has refused up till now every single waiver request that's come before it. And it's in part because, as the Trump administration said in 2018 with the Maine waiver request, they do not want to get into the business of picking winners and losers among foods and debating the relative health merits of each, right? That came from the USDA. Now, we hear big changes are coming, and so that maybe the USDA is going to do something different now. But up till now, they've been universally solid in their opposition to this kind of a waiver. So why is that? Well, the statute referenced in this bill defines candy such that any item with flour listed as an ingredient is excluded. Also, soft drinks or any non-alcoholic beverages that contain natural or artificial sweeteners. So diet sodas, Gatorade Zero, all those kinds of things would be ineligible under this bill because they have artificial sweeteners, right? So we end up with bizarre trade-offs or juxtapositions. Licorice is banned, but Twizzlers would be allowed because Twizzlers lists flour as an ingredient. A Reese's bar is out, but Milky Ways, which contain barley flour, are okay. Twix, Kit Kats, no problem, right? You can't have a Coke Zero, but all the Twinkies and Ho-Hos you want to purchase are fine under this bill. You can't have Diet Dr. Pepper, but you can literally buy a 10-pound bag of refined sugar from the grocery aisle and take it home and sprinkle it on everything you want. Okay? So the point is that it's going to be messy because the definitions are not clear and fast. Even though we think we know what we mean when we talk about candy and soft drinks, it's a lot messier than that, right? And we could do this all day, talking about what products would be in and what products would be out. But unfortunately, this bill is going to force my clerks to do exactly that every day, right? my clerks are going to be on the front lines trying to educate consumers about what is and what isn't eligible for their SNAP benefits. So it's unlike tobacco or alcoholic beverages, which is like pretty easy categories to talk through. There may be some tiny definitional issues, but by and large, when you think of those things, you know what we're talking about. That is not the case when you look at the candy aisle. It is just not the case. Second, customers usually present their SNAP card only after everything is rung up, which means that we are going to be put in the position of trying to say, nope, you got to put this back. No, you have to pay out of cash money while they're digging in their coin purse to try to find enough money to cover that item in their grocery cart. That's going to clog up our lines. It's going to create back and forth controversy with customers, and it's going to make our clerks' jobs more difficult. Someone has to enter all of those exclusions into our POS systems. And it is true the POS systems can handle having different items excluded, but somebody still has to enter all of that. And if we are uniquely different in Kansas from the other 49 states, that makes that job more difficult because we can't just rely on the suppliers to download the POS information that we can currently, right? So all of these end up, oh, and by the way, if we're going to try to stop fighting with customers at the cash register, then our other option is to go label all the shelves and tell you which items are and are not eligible, and all of that takes employee time, okay? And so all of these are real costs being borne by our businesses, and once people learn the new rules, there's no shortage of other, at least as unhealthy alternatives that they could pick. Right? So we don't actually solve the obesity crisis by banning these two small categories of items if they're going to turn around and get all the Twinkies and Ho-Hos that want. There's no way you can say that has more nutritional value than M&Ms, right? It's just all about preference when you start getting down into those distinctions. Now, recipients will be able to find workarounds, but a recent Brookings Institution study did find that, quote, a ban will likely increase the administrative costs to both the USDA and retailers and increase the stigma faced by recipients when they use the benefits, but not have the benefit of inducing any behavioral changes. So it might make us feel good to strike this blow against obesity, but it's not actually going to solve the problem. Third, it turns out that my retailers may not be willing to pay these additional costs due to this unfunded mandate. SNAP acceptance could very well decline, right? SNAP is already, in some of our cases, barely worth the trouble because getting reimbursed from the federal government is messy sometimes. There's all this reporting you have to do. It's like it's not just super simple in every state in terms of how all of this works. And so you do increase the odds that you have some retailers saying, yeah, they can do that at the grocery store. I'm just going to stop taking SNAP, which is fine if there's lots of options. But in small rural communities in Kansas, my retail location might literally be the only opportunity for participants to get their SNAP benefits without driving 30 or 40 miles to the nearest grocery store. And that's why you'll see, if you go to those stores, you'll see lots of healthy options as well as candy and soft drinks. You'll see gallons of milk, you'll see green vegetables, you'll see fruits available, you'll see whole bananas, right? Our merchants are selling those things because they're filling the need for a market in that little community, not just filling the need for convenient snacks. Right? Oh, and you heard earlier that soft drinks were the #1 item purchased, and that's true, but it's a little bit misleading, right? Because soft drinks accounted for roughly 5% of all SNAP benefit purchases last year. So a nickel out of every dollar was spent on soft drinks. #2 was milk. #3 was not candy. #3 was beef. And #4 and 5, you get down, #4 is salty snacks with roughly 3% being spent on salty snacks. This bill does nothing to address all the chips and snacks and unhealthy things in the salty aisle, right? And so the point is that candy is, sure, not a healthy choice, but it's not necessarily the dominant choice that's happening in creating obesity in America. Finally, the USDA would have to grant a waiver. They've never done so in the past. The most recent attempt, as you heard, was Maine in 2018, and the USDA under Trump said they refused to pick winners and losers among food products. Now, I'll leave you with this. The federal farm bill is way overdue. We're going to get a farm bill in the next 12 months, I'm pretty sure, because they've already extended it and extended it and extended it. Now we have a new administration, and you've heard big changes are coming, right? If RFK gets confirmed, and MAHA becomes the rule of the day, we're going to see a very different looking federal program in terms of our SNAP benefits in less than a year. The worst outcome I can imagine right now for Kansas would be for us to go out on a limb, do something definitionally different than all the other states have done, and get permission to do something radically departing from what other states do, and then maybe be out of step with whatever the feds end up doing. So a little bit of a prudent approach might be a little bit of patience. Let's see what comes with the MAHA efforts under RFK, and let's see how the changes unfold to the federal program. We might not even have to do a bill at that point because they've fixed all the problems, and maybe they'll fix something more extensive than what we have in terms of just talking about this faulty definition of candy and soft drinks. So with that, my members stand opposed to this bill, 2015. We ask you do not vote for it, even though it's a very well-meaning bill. We feel like it's misguided and it's going to hurt small business in this state. So with that, I will yield and answer questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Real quick, any questions, Committee Representative Bergkamp?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your testimony. How many of your stores don't have POS systems today, would you say?
Most stores do. It would be the really small one-off mom and pops that are still like tagging things by hand with their printers. So most of them do use POS systems.
And then we talked about WIC a little bit earlier. So how does that work at a convenience store where, let's say, you buy 20 items, but only half apply to WIC, but the other half don't?
Yeah.
Is that a similar situation or different?
Very few of my retailers take WIC. SNAP is very common, not very common, but more than half of my retailers take SNAP. WIC is very uncommon. And it depends, markets and what all is around them and things like that. So some of the most rural food desert sort of locations might take WIC, but it's much less utilized than SNAP is by my retailers.
So then if you had a SNAP debit card, if you had items that were ineligible, I guess you couldn't ring it up all at once. You'd have to do it separate. Am I understanding that right? Or would it recognize which ones are eligible and which ones aren't? And just say, now you owe $10 because these 5 are deemed ineligible.
Certainly your Dillons and your big grocery stores will have it set up like that. So they just ring everything up and then they say, okay, you can use your benefits on this portion, the remaining portion is yours. So some of my bigger retailers, maybe Casey's, Quick Trip, some of the ones that are really big will have those. Their problem is more state-to-state variation is bad. If they're in multiple states, they want their systems to be similar, right, instead of having a Kansas. You kind of, as a one and done, you fix it one time and it's good. For individual items that have to go into your inventory, each of those has to be input separately. So it's not like it's not possible to put all the correct eligibility items and tag them all appropriately. It just takes person hours to do that. And so if we don't have a unique solution for Kansas, then suppliers that supply in multiple states, they can help you kind of download stuff and make it much easier than if you are trying to do it all yourself.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. My question, I'm not sure if this is for you, but I'm a little confused on the what is a SNAP card? You use that terminology in your testimony. What's a SNAP card?
Yeah, so EBT benefits, you can have a card that you carry in your wallet that gets loaded with your assistance. And I am probably not the best person to explain exactly how that all works.
Okay.
But you can swipe a card.
Debit card?
I think it's like a debit card.
Okay, but you
separate.
said that some of your stores, that the federal government was slow in reimbursing. They're not, it seems like if it's a debit card.
Yeah, so again, I'm not up on all the specifics. I just heard members complain that there are significant reporting requirements that they have to do. And so I think there's, maybe it's like when the merchant gets ready to do all of their taxes and talk about what they do in terms of their sales, they have to report to the federal government so that we know, for example, okay, 5% of all SNAP benefits went to buy these products or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so there are strings that come with being a retailer that accepts these benefits. It's not just like people are handing you cash.
But they have that now. I mean, this wouldn't change it. I mean, they have those requirements now with SNAP.
They do.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But I'm sorry, just
Go ahead.
to clarify.
Yeah.
So the fact that we now have to deal with this additional hassle of trying to educate everybody as to what is eligible and what is not, and the fact that we can't sell all of these products, which are a pretty significant part of what gets sold at convenience stores, means that the profit they're going to make by taking SNAP will not be, the calculus changes a bit, right? So even though it's worth the hassle because people are buying not only milk and beef, but they're also buying these products that you guys want to ban, because of that, and we can no longer sell all of those, then all of a sudden the calculus changes, and I have retailers who might be like, I don't think it's worth it anymore.
Yeah, I can imagine, though, that your stores would then say, oh, I'm selling more Twix bars than Hershey bars. I mean, I would assume that, it's going to fill in. And yeah, maybe there'd be a kind of uncomfortable time period, but that would be the same as now with cigarettes or alcohol. I assume that there's still some hassle
you're
to
right.
that.
There will be workarounds that people will figure out. So if they can't buy M&Ms anymore, they'll be buying more Twinkies or something else.
So it's not perfect,
Yeah.
for sure, but is it a start? I mean, for me, that's what it's about, soda and candy, that it's a start. So, yeah.
I understand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you. Mr. Chair. Mr. Postler, you said that a very small percentage of your members would be WIC approved or participate in the WIC program. Can you get us those figures as to how small of a percentage that is?
I don't know that I can, but I will do my best to.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your presentation. I just wonder where we would be if we flipped this. Instead of talking about candy and soda, we flipped this and we were asking for an exemption so that we would be getting the rotisserie chicken, the Casey's breakfast burritos, some of the really, really good foods, and give the ability for people to have things that would have protein in them and chicken and different things like that if we were flipping and asking for the different exemption for that rather than the other. Where all these people that are coming and talking to us today, whether you would still be on the same track as you're talking about now, or would you be still where you're at? So just not a question, more of a statement.
Yeah, so my response to that would be, I think you're very much on the right track. And there are some kind of programs, and I'm, again, not the most versed in all the assistance programs. Maybe some of my colleagues behind me can help. There are programs that exist that try to incentivize healthy choices. And so, for example, if you could, because people will be powerfully motivated if they know their SNAP dollars will go farther if they purchase more approved products that are kale and vegetables and whatever it is we want people to have more of, and they got additional benefits if they bought more of those kinds of items. That might be a good way of motivating behavior at the consumer level, rather than going down the road of trying to identify unhealthy things to prohibit, right? Which is, again, going to have these winners and losers and not necessarily address the issue. So if we really want them to eat in more healthy ways, we should probably focus our energy on trying to incentivize healthy choices rather than trying to pick the winners and losers of what should be prohibited.
Right, where I was going with that is, we're not letting people buy chicken. We're not letting people buy breakfast burritos, anything that is pre-made kind of thing. And there are a lot of good, healthy products that your convenience stores sell every day that are not on that list that would actually be good for people to have. So, thank you.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be too detailed, but just curious how it works. So SNAP benefits are exempt from state and local sales tax. Do you know if the system automatically backs that off, or if the cashier has to manually do that when somebody uses a debit card?
I don't know that specific an answer. I imagine it depends on your POS system, right? So my larger retailers will have more sophisticated systems that would do more of those kinds of things. Some of my smaller retailers that are mom and pops or whatever would be less likely to have that glossy of a system.
I don't know much about it. I was just curious, so thank you.
So earlier, somebody asked for the data on WIC acceptance at convenience stores. Did you have the data on SNAP acceptance at convenience stores?
I don't have actual numbers for Kansas, but in general, I think the vast majority of SNAP benefits get utilized at grocery stores. A smaller percentage get used at convenience stores. So we are not definitely not the biggest player in the market of who accepts SNAP benefits. It's your big Dillons or your Krogers and folks like that that get the lion's share of benefits.
So did I hear you clearly? You do not have the data on how many convenience stores accept SNAP or don't?
In Kansas, I do not have that data. It may be something we can research and find out, but it's not information I have.
So if you don't have the data, could you guess how many, you talked about your major ones, your minor ones, and the difficulty on the minor ones.
Yeah. So to me,
how many small mom and pop convenience stores would accept SNAP if you were to guess at it?
yeah, if I had to guess, we're probably at a slim majority that accept SNAP benefits among the roughly 2,000 retail locations. But I don't know that. My source has been just talking to my members and talking to my board because I don't have a definitive data source to turn to. But the USDA would have that. We just would have to get that information from them.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, sir, for your presentation. To kind of piggyback off of what the chairman asked, with respect to small businesses, what percentage of retailers in Kansas would be considered small business versus, all businesses?
Vast majority of retail locations in Kansas are single store or 2 or 3 store kinds of owners. Everyone knows the big ones, the Quick Trips and the 24/7s and Casey's, of course, is a giant. But by far, the vast majority of those, the Amoco on your corner, that is a fuel retailer, is somebody in your community that owns a local business and they just have a distributor. They pay for the name so they can sell Amoco branded gas, and they offer that as their family business.
Thank you. And if I may, what percentage would you say that was if you're talking of percentages? Is it 70% for small businesses?
Of the 2,000 retail locations, I know I've got 34 Pete's in southeast Kansas. I know I've got, I know how many Quick Trips. There's like 28 Quick Trips that with the Q, right? So if you take those away, everything else is going to be a very small operator in terms of, and so at least 75%, I would guess, of the retail locations are what I would consider a small business.
So there would be potentially 75% of all businesses that are considered small businesses that would then have to make some sort of an adjustment, which would be individualized to their business and not something that they could import from another state if, in fact, we were to implement this. Is that correct?
If we varied from what they're doing federally, every location would have to update POS systems for sure.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may ask for a clarification, every location which accepts SNAP.
Correct.
So it's not
That's
every,
exactly right.
And it's not all of them. So it's
That's
just those, and we don't have the numbers or percentages of how many that would be.
You're correct.
All right, thank you. Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, we have Karen Siebert, Advocacy and Public Policy Advisor, Harvesters. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. This testimony is submitted on behalf of Harvesters, the Kansas Food Bank, and Second Harvest Community Food Bank, which together serve all the hungry and food insecure in all 105 counties in the state. Last year, our networks of charitable food pantries distributed more than 46 million pounds of food to those in need in Kansas, from our smallest rural communities to major metropolitan areas. We oppose HB 2015, but I'd like to start today where we agree. And that's with our common concern about the health of Americans. The increasing rates of obesity and diet-related diseases are of great concern. It's a complex problem that cuts across incomes, geography, and political parties. It's about processed food, It's about physical activity. It's about marketing. It's about genetics. It's about economics. While we wish there was a simple policy lever that would solve this, there's not. The policy solution suggested today will not solve the problem we face and will, in fact, create new problems that will impact the availability of nutritious food for all of us, particularly those in our rural communities. I've outlined some of those concerns in the written testimony, but I want to highlight a few things. Unfortunately, the food choices of SNAP recipients mirror the rest of the population. We should all eat better. This bill may be a classic example of the old adage, do as I say, not as I do. Or maybe it's physician, heal thyself. One thing I would like to mention about that the conferee from Florida mentioned is the definition of candy is very complex. His suggestion is that the free market will take care of this, and apparently they'll no longer make this candy. I believe that the free market will also respond, and I believe when they understand that if it has flour in it, it's not candy. Pretty much everything that they make will have a dollop of flour in it, so it doesn't fit this definition and is eligible for SNAP. And the problem for our retailers is they will get caught in the crosshairs, because as soon as they say, you can't have those Twizzlers with your SNAP dollars, the Twizzler company will likely take that retailer to task in legal terms and say that person should have been allowed to purchase that. It'll all be litigated, and this is going to get very messy very quick. The fundamental problem for SNAP recipients and for all of us is that healthy food is more expensive. SNAP benefits certainly help. A recent study showed that low-income SNAP recipients incur nearly 25% less medical costs than their low-income neighbors who are not receiving SNAP. But SNAP benefits, which can be as little as $23 a month, can't make up for the fact that food inflation is up 28% since 2019, well outpacing wage increases. While we all feel the impact of food inflation, it hits low-income families particularly hard. People in the lowest income brackets, the bottom 20% of income, which the SNAP population would be, spend nearly 1/3 of their income on food. And that third of their income has increased 30% over the last 5 years. And while the top 20% of earners spend just 8% of their income on food. So you have felt the impact of food inflation when you go to the grocery store and buy something that butter that's now $4 for a pound of butter. You see that, you notice that. Imagine if you were a struggling family that was purchasing those things, and that's now 30% of their income is seeing that, of their income is seeing that kind of an increase. And that's one of the reasons that the most recent MAP and Meal Gap report from Feeding America shows that food insecurity in Kansas was up 31% over the previous year. It's about economics. The unintended consequences of this bill is its impact on Kansas's small businesses. While people may assume that these suggested purchasing restrictions are tied to the SNAP beneficiary's EBT card, those restrictions are actually attached to the Kansas cash register. Placing more restrictions and red tape on SNAP retailers will make it more difficult for our small family-owned stores to participate in SNAP. And if families have to travel to a neighboring community, county, or state to use their SNAP benefits at a big box store, they'll likely do their other shopping there as well, further undermining the viability of Main Street, Kansas. And I want to mention a few things that from the other conferees' comments. The conferee from Florida said, we never talk about these issues. I would like to point out that the hunger relief community has been talking about healthy eating issues for decades. We have the Double Up Food Bucks program here in Kansas, which doubles the amount of SNAP benefits spent on fresh fruits and vegetables. We have SNAP Ed through the state agency, through the federal agencies. At the food banks, we have done what we can to increase the distribution of fresh produce. We now distribute 30% of what we distribute is fresh produce. That's an incredible investment on our part, because to distribute fresh fruits and vegetables, we have to have refrigerated trucks. We have to have food pantries that also have access to refrigeration. They've got to get a refrigerator at their church food pantry. That also is going to require potentially an upgrade in their electrical, because they're going to have that on all the time. They're going to have to pay higher bills. So there's costs all along that route, and we've tried to do what we can to help with that whole supply chain to make sure we can distribute that kind of food, but it is difficult. So I would just say this work is being done. We're doing what we can, and there is a lot of, and I'm happy to talk with any of you about some of those efforts that we have done. In addition, we've worked with the healthcare industry, trying to get our healthcare providers to screen for food insecurity. We had one doctor who said, you know, I always told my patients to take their medicine with food, and I never thought to ask, do you have food? So that basic kind of level, we've been doing that work for years. We've been working with them to provide produce prescriptions, to provide boxes for people with diabetes that have healthier foods in them, or for hypertension and those kinds of things. So just wanted to let you know those things are happening here in Kansas. And I also want to mention that the Modern Food Stamp Program, while signed into law by Jimmy Carter, was actually designed by Kansas's own Bob Dole. That he oversaw that and tried to make SNAP as efficient as possible for the federal government, for the state governments. It works best because it is going through regular channels of commerce and make that program as simple as possible for the vendors that we have, which is part of the reason that SNAP is so effective. We have, I think, about 2,000 SNAP vendors in the state. And when you look at WIC, which is a great program, don't get me wrong, it's a great program, participation rate in that is quite a bit less than SNAP. I think only about 50% of eligible folks. And also the vendor participation is a lot less. I believe there's about 350 SNAP WIC vendors around the state because of the administrative complexity of that program. The vendors just don't participate. So if you look at the difference between 350 to 2,000, it will impact folks in Kansas. And if those stores aren't there, it could affect all of us. And the other thing I wanted to mention was some of the statistics about what SNAP users purchase. Take a look at some of those, the research studies done about what is done on a SNAP purchase. You asked about how you determine what is purchased by SNAP and what is purchased with other dollars. It really depends on that store, but in most cases, the point of sale system will simply take off the first thing on the register, and those will be the SNAP purchases. So you could buy a whole bunch of fresh fruits and vegetables, but there for the end of the conveyor belt, and the sodas or bakery items or whatever is at the beginning, that's what's going to be recorded as a SNAP purchase. So to be very careful about that. But overall, we all eat the same, about 40% of what the general populace spends at the grocery store is on fruits and vegetables, and it's the same with SNAP beneficiaries as well. So, and with that, I will stop. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Representative Barth.
Thank you, Chairman Auerkamp. And Karen, so I see that you have harvesters on here. You talked about harvesters. I personally have volunteered for harvesters. I have worked for an education foundation where we established funds, where we did the back snack program, where we worked eventually in partnership, where harvesters took over the back snack program to send food home on weekends for kids who may not have food. I was actually really surprised by your testimony being an opponent to kids having better, healthier choices and being able to pick something that's unhealthy. I know this doesn't cover everything, but I'm having a hard time understanding your testimony of how you could not advocate for kids to have healthier choices. Can you help explain that?
I'm sorry that that's how the assumption you made is that we don't want children to have healthy choices. As I said, we have worked for decades to improve what we are able to offer as a donation reliant organization. We are getting what's in the grocery stores, and as all of us eat less healthy food, those are the kinds of things that get donated. So we do what we can. But we think there is dignity in allowing a family to choose what they need to purchase and to make policy decisions on these assumptions that they're only eating, that low-income people are eating worse than any of us is what I sort of have a problem with.
I guess on that same topic, hopefully, so it's SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. So this isn't restricting the family from buying what they want. This is, from my perspective, more respecting the intention of the the welfare program. And the intention is to help with more the essentials, the basics. And it still gives people the choice to buy what they want if they use their own money. But if they're using the public assistance dollars, the idea is that it needs to reflect the intention behind that program, which is more the nutritional assistance. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think as the previous conferee said, where do you draw that line? Bakery items, who decides what's healthy and what's not? Is it the presence of something? Apparently, it's the presence of flour. Is it the absence of something? If you're saying it's healthy because it's the absence of sugar, well, then Diet Coke is okay, but orange juice is not. If you say it's the presence of something healthy, well, you can have Lucky Charms because it's fortified. When you start getting into those definitions, any dietitian will tell you they don't exclude any food from a meal because anything is fine in moderation. And again, when you're looking at creating policy on some of these vague ideas that low-income people are purchasing these SNAP benefits, are using their SNAP benefits in a different way than the general public, I don't think the data holds up.
So on that point, it's not necessarily that they use it differently than the general public. It's more, are they using those SNAP benefits for the intended purpose, which is nutritional assistance? So with that, committee, any further questions? Representative Humphreys.
Thanks. Thank you. It seems like you have a lot of information about, well, SNAP benefits. And so you said it can be as little as $23 a month. But do you have any idea what the average amount per family of 4 would be, or, you know, what percent of their grocery dollars they would use would be a SNAP benefit, or anything about that?
I don't have the overall numbers. I do know that the average SNAP benefit is about $2 a meal a day.
I'm sorry, $2?
$2 a meal a day. So $6 a day is the average SNAP benefit. That's a federal.
Per person in the family. So if there were 4 people in the family, $24 a day. Yeah, something like that. Okay.
And the average meal cost in Kansas is about $4 a day.
Right, because this is just assistance. This isn't, yeah, so, but I do find it interesting, kind of along the same lines that, you know, yeah, we may not agree that Lucky Charms are more or less healthy than other things, but you know, when it's you can get an energy drink versus a gallon of milk. You know, a 2-pack of energy drink is going to be more expensive than a gallon of milk. And so it is interesting to me with the taxpayer dollars, with the intent of the SNAP, that, you know, encouraging nutritional purchases seems like that makes a lot of sense, especially for someone who's really interested in making sure that we don't have food lacking for families. So, yeah.
I think that I appreciate the spirit of wanting to make sure taxpayer dollars are well used. My concern is, again, on the grocery side, this has a significant impact on those grocers, and basically creating a lot of red tape because the argument seems to be, well, they can use their own money for that. Then we're not actually talking about changing health and changing behaviors. It's just you don't want tax dollars used for that kind of food. And I mean, I think there are other ways that tax dollars get used on candy and soda. And so I don't think you're changing the behavior and you're getting the health outcomes that you say you want by just moving something farther down on the conveyor belt and putting it on there, and you're just creating problems for the grocers.
Some of it's awareness, you know, just helping people read the labels and being aware of what.
And SNAP Ed.
That's part of it.
Works well for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our final opponent, Miranda Miller Kliegser from the Senior Director, Kansas Food Action Network. Okay, we show her as in person. And also, committee, we have 4 other written-only opponents. The committee, we just have a few more minutes. Any further questions for Representative Owsley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick comment for the committee to not forget that Kansas has SNAP reduced to a 24-month lifetime limit from the eligible 5-year federal program. Thank you.
So Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you don't mind, could you give the committee an explanation that they might better understand what you mean by how it depends on where the food is on the conveyor as to whether or not it's charged against your SNAP benefit?
Thank you. I believe that it depends on the grocer, but in those systems where it's, you'll go through the whole grocery line and then you'll put in your SNAP card and it'll just take off the things until if you have $30 on your SNAP card, it'll take off the first $30 on your conveyor belt, and then it'll take the rest off of your other payment form, whether that's cash or your personal debit card. So when you're accounting to those as being SNAP dollars, I don't know that anyone realizes I'm using my SNAP dollars on that soft drink. They might think they're using it on the vegetables, but they don't control the point of sale system.
So you could, in fact, be in the store and purchase $100 worth of vegetables and $30 or $10 worth of soda and ice cream. And if the soda and ice cream happens to hit the conveyor first, then that's what's going to be charged on your SNAP benefits card.
I believe so. I mean, I'm not a grocer, so I don't know, but it is my understanding that that's how that works.
Thank you. That was my question.
I think last, looks like no further questions. So we're going to close the opponent portion of the hearing, moving on to neutrals. Anybody want to speak neutral, pure neutral on this? Seeing none, we'll close the neutral portion of the hearing and close the hearing on House Bill 2015. Committee, that wraps up the agenda for today. I think Gary had 2 testimonies come in late, so he might email you their testimonies, so you might see that later today. With that, we have a meeting on Thursday, and we are adjourned.